Welcome back, fight fans. Appreciate you joining me as always. In today's video, this is actually going to be part one of a two-part series where we're going to be covering the fights on the main event for UFC 241 coming to you live this Saturday, August 17th at Anaheim, California. So in this video, we're going to be covering the first three fights on the main card, and in the second video, we're going to be covering the co-main event, Anthony Pettis versus Nate Diaz, and the main event, DC versus Stipe Miocic. So if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, and if you like what you see, give me a nice thumbs up. I really appreciate the support. So let's hop right into it. In the first fight on the main card this Saturday, we got number 8 ranked Derek Brunson versus number 10 Ian the Hurricane Heinisch. This is coming to you out of the middleweight division. So betting odds for this fight, Ian Heinisch is a minus 170 favorite. So a little bit of background on both these fighters. Ian is 31 years old. He's 5'11", 71-inch reach, and he's got a 13-1 MMA record coming off 5 straight wins. He's got 4 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 7 decisions. Ian does. Man, what a story for Ian Heinisch. He sold ecstasy, got busted, fled the country, started muling drugs back and forth between Spain and South America, got busted, was an inmate and spent time in the Canary Islands where he started to train MMA. Came back to the United States after his sentence, got busted upon his return to the United States, was an inmate at Rikers Island where he actually got into some sort of trouble there where there was a hit out for him, and I guess he was almost shanked. He was almost killed, but was pulled out of the situation sort of at the last minute. Got out of Rikers Island, moved back to Colorado, where he was put on probation, started to train MMA in earnest, and look where he's at now. The guy's a UFC fighter, so just an unbelievable turnaround story for Ian Heinisch, and it's really exciting seeing somebody like that turn their life around and really make something of themselves here in the UFC. But he's got a big fight on Saturday night. He's fighting Derek Brunson, the former high school cheerleader. Yeah, not kidding. Derek Brunson was a former high school cheerleader and wrestler. So he actually had scholarships for both cheerleading and wrestling going into college. Decided to wrestle in college, where he was a 3-time Division II All-American. After college, started training MMA, was Renzo Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and part of Jackson's MMA as well. So he's 35 years old, 6'1", 78-inch reach advantage. So he's got a 7-inch reach advantage in this fight. 19-7 MMA career, MMA professional record, 11 knockouts, 3 submissions, 5 decisions. So Derek's coming off of a win against Elias Theodorou, but he lost his 2 previous fights, both of those by knockout, one of them to Israel Adesanya, the other to Jacare Souza. So all of his UFC losses, though, look at the names on this list. The people he's lost to in the UFC: Israel Adesanya, Jacare Souza, Anderson Silva, Robert Whittaker, and Yoel Romero. So it seems like in order to beat this guy, Derek Brunson, you've got to be an elite level fighter in the middleweight division. Some of his notable wins: Chris Lieben, Uriah Hall, Lyoto Machida. So he's got some good wins too. But let's take a look at the striking. So statistically, Ian lands more and absorbs less. But Derek Brunson has more knockouts to his name and a higher statistical percentage of wins coming via knockout than Ian does. 10 wins in the UFC, 6 of them by knockout. But Ian packs power too. And Derek, out of his 7 losses, 5 of them have come by knockout. So Derek sort of lives by the sword and dies by the sword. Almost half of all Derek's strikes happen in the clinch or on the ground. So, 1 out of 2 of Derek's significant strikes landed, only 1 out of 2, I should say, is at distance on the feet. And while standing, almost 20% of his strikes are leg strikes. So he mixes in leg kicks as well. But I think Ian has better boxing. Derek is more wild and unorthodox on his feet, but he does tend to connect sort of at the end of his punches where there is a lot of power. So interesting matchup, stylistically on the feet here. But let's take a look at grappling. So both of these guys have nice wrestling backgrounds. I mentioned Derek's Division II collegiate wrestling career. Ian Heinisch is also a former two-time Colorado high school state champion at wrestling. So he's no joke when it comes to the wrestling game either. But Ian only lands 1 takedown per 15 minutes, and he's got a 50% takedown defense rate. Whereas you look at Derek Brunson, he lands 2.35 takedowns per 15 minutes and has a 100% takedown defense rate. So I got to give the grappling advantage, at least the wrestling advantage here, to Derek Brunson. Derek's also a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, he's not amazing at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by any means, but it is an art that he practices under Renzo Gracie. So grappling advantage to Derek Brunson. Now, as far as my prediction for this fight goes, I think this fight is going to come down to who lands more takedowns. I don't think this is an overly entertaining fight. Neither of these guys are excellent on the feet. Neither of these guys are really knockout artists on the feet. Both like clinch work, both like takedowns and takedown defense. They like fighting up against the cage. I think that throughout the course of 3 rounds, I think Derek lands a couple of the more bigger strikes. I think he lands 1 or 2 more takedowns than Ian does. I think he stuffs 1 or 2 more takedowns than Ian does. And I just think over the course of 3 rounds, Derek Brunson does a little bit more than Ian Heinisch to get the slight upset underdog win here. And I'm going to go by split decision. For our second fight of the night, coming to you out of the featherweight division, we've got Super Sodiq Yusuff versus Gabriel Benitez. Betting odds for this fight, Sodiq minus 335 favorite. So a little bit of background. Sodiq, he's a Nigerian, 26 years old, 5'9", 71-inch reach, 9-1 MMA record. Signed to the UFC a year ago after an impressive victory in Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series against Mike Davis. Mike Davis is a super tough fighter with excellent technique, but Sodiq went in there and his forward aggression, his power, he was able to get the unanimous decision victory over Mike Davis and get the UFC contract. So since then, or including that fight, he's 3-0 in the UFC, and he's coming off of a unanimous decision win over Shaman Moraes. Gabriel, the Mexican, he's a member of Team AKA, the American Kickboxing Academy. He's 31 years old, 5'8", 71-inch reach. He's an MMA vet, 21-6 MMA record, coming off 2 straight wins, but he's actually even more experienced than the 21-6 record goes to show. He's got a lot of professional fights that were in ineligible organizations, and so his record is actually even more impressive than that. It's just that not all of them are eligibly recorded for the UFC to recognize. So let's take a look at striking. Gabriel is fast, and he uses space really well. And he's a southpaw, and he moves from distance. He lands a lot at distance. He throws really good left kicks, being a southpaw, both low calf kicks, mid-level liver kicks, head kicks. He's got a really good left kick. And I think he'll have to use that a lot in this fight to slow Sodiq down, which I'll touch on here in a second. So in his 27 professional fights, he's only been knocked out once. So I think Gabriel's striking is a little bit underrated. In his fight against Jason Knight, I think that was 2 fights ago on his record, Jason Knight was a minus 350 favorite in that fight. And he was simply outclassed by Gabriel. Gabriel got the unanimous decision over Jason, and he looked savvy. He looked like good technique, good composure, and he just looked savvy. So Gabriel's got good striking. Sodiq, though, this guy has some of the biggest power in the entire division. Throws heavy hands and heavy calf kicks. I think if he hit me with one of his calf kicks, he would break my shin in half. That dude throws heavy calf kicks. So he's just extremely dangerous on the feet. 9 wins in MMA, 5 of them by knockout. He lands over 5.5 significant strikes per minute, but check this out. He absorbs almost 8 significant strikes per minute. So he needs to vastly improve his defense, but he's so tough and durable that it's almost like he's willing to accept whatever you're throwing at him if it means he's going to land on you too, because he knows it's not 1-for-1 when you're trading with Sodiq here. His punch is going to inflict more damage on you than yours is on him. So he's almost willing to accept damage to inflict damage. So I think Sodiq's going to have the striking advantage against a lot of guys, in this division, and I think he's going to have the striking advantage in this fight as well. When it comes to grappling, though, Sodiq has a 100% takedown defense rate. He's never been taken down in the UFC. He's super strong in the clinch. It doesn't matter if he's got the overhook, the underhook, super strong in the clinch. But he also averages 0 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's got 0 submission victories. So Sodiq is neither giving up takedowns nor getting takedowns. So he's gonna want to keep this fight standing. Gabriel, on the other hand, out of his 21 victories, 10 of them have come by submissions. So Gabriel's, I think, clear path to victory in this fight is to somehow take Sodiq down, keep him down there, and submit him down there, or just really rack up points when it comes to control. I don't think he's going to be able to take Sodiq down and keep him there without threatening submissions and getting submissions. But I think that's how Gabriel needs to plan on to win this fight, is to take Sodiq down and execute on some of his jiu-jitsu skills. So although he is a American Kickboxing Academy fighter, Gabriel, Team AKA, who have some of the best wrestlers in all of the UFC, his wrestling really isn't that great. He only averages 0.23 takedowns per 15 minutes. So 0.23 takedowns per 15 minutes, fighting a guy who has a 100% takedown defense rate. I don't see Gabriel being able to take Sodiq down in this fight. I think it stays standing. So because I think it stays standing, I think Sodiq's going to win this fight. I think Gabriel is a really tough man. I respect his experience. I respect his durability. And so although Sodiq can knock anybody out, I do respect Gabriel, and I think that this goes the distance. I think that Sodiq gets the unanimous decision win over Gabriel in this fight. So for our third fight of the night, coming to you out of the middleweight division, we got the number 2 ranked middleweight, Yoel, Soldier of God, Romero, versus number 7, Paulo Costa. Betting odds for this fight, Yoel Romero, -165 favorite. Paulo Costa is the Brazilian, 28 years old, 6 foot tall, 72-inch reach. He's undefeated, 12-0 with 12 finishes, which is just crazy to have finished every single one of your opponents. 11 knockouts, 1 submission. He's coming off of a second-round TKO over Uriah Hall. Yoel Romero, the Cuban, 42 years old. He's 42 going on 28. He's 6 feet tall, 73.5-inch reach, 13-3 with 11 knockouts and 2 decisions. He's coming off of a split decision loss against Robert Whitaker, which a lot of people think Yoel won that fight, and had it gone that way, Yoel would be sitting here today as the middleweight champion of the world. So let's take a look at striking, though. Paulo Costa, he is always leading the dance, man. He never takes a step back. He lands an incredible 8.83 significant strikes per minute. It's just ridiculous, that sort of output. But he also absorbs 5.8 significant strikes per minute. So he's constantly in your face, overwhelming opponents, but he's also taking damage as well. Paulo's got huge power, and he focuses solely on head and body. 97% of Paulo's significant strikes landed are to the head and body, only 3% to the legs. So you know what he's going to try and do. He's going to try and come at you, get in your face, and tear you up body and head. He does most of the striking on his feet too, 75%, 14% of the clinch, only 11% on the ground. So Yoel's got a much lower output, but a much higher defense rate. Yoel only lands 3.32 significant strikes per minute, but each one of those 3.32 significant strikes per minute are deadly. And it's a good combination of attacking the head, body, legs, 57% head, 20% body, 23% legs, and he hits you from anywhere too. 67% standing, 14% of the clinch, 20% on the ground. So you take a look at that, 20% on the ground. I'll touch on grappling here in a second, but we sort of know the pathways to victory, I think, for each of these fighters. I give the striking advantage to Paulo Costa. As deadly and as scary as Yoel Romero is, Paulo Costa with 8.83 significant strikes per minute is just absurd. I think from a volume perspective, Paulo Costa is going to rack up points on the feet if he keeps that level of output up against Yoel Romero. As far as like one strike knockout capabilities, you got to give that to Yoel Romero. We've seen him absolutely murder people on the feet, flying knees, huge left hands. Yoel Romero has one punch knockout power like anybody in the division has. So, but from a point standpoint, I got to give the advantage to Costa here. Grappling though, grappling advantage clearly goes to Yoel Romero. He is a former silver medalist in the Olympics, multi-time world champion. Yoel Romero beat Cael Sanderson, guys, more than once. And if any of you guys are wrestling fans out there or know anything about wrestling, you know who Cael Sanderson is, one of the greatest of all time, greatest Americans of all time. Yoel Romero has beat him multiple times. So that's the sort of level of wrestling we're talking about when we think of Yoel Romero. That, in my opinion, is Yoel's clear pathway to victory here. If he doesn't get the one punch, huge knockout standing on the feet, he has got to take Costa down to the ground and inflict damage on the ground. But Paulo's a BJJ black belt as well. So should Yoel, I think if and when Yoel Romero gets Paulo Costa down to the ground, he's got to be safe. Okay, so he's got to do a lot of damage, and nobody's better at ground and pound than Yoel Romero, but he's got to be safe while he's doing it up against somebody like Paulo Costa, who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Really strong, tough, durable guy on the ground. So grappling advantage goes to Yoel Romero, but be safe. Paulo Costa has got some pretty mean jiu-jitsu as well. Even though he's only got one submission out of his 12 wins, it's because he's knocking most guys out. It doesn't mean that he doesn't know how to submit people. He does. So my prediction for this fight, boy, I've been really going back and forth on this one, and everybody loves Yoel Romero. He's the favorite in this fight, but God, I've been going back and forth. It's almost like pick it, guys. Who flip a coin almost. But I'll get to my prediction here. I think the young, undefeated Paulo Costa gets the victory. I think he outpoints Yoel Romero on the feet. I think if he avoids getting knocked out on the feet by Yoel Romero, he wins the striking exchanges on the feet. When we saw Yoel Romero against Robert Whittaker, Yoel really started to take over that fight in the later rounds. Robert was really getting the better of Yoel Romero in rounds 1, 2, 3. And this is only a 3-round fight. And that's because of Yoel Romero's durability and the power that he has. So over the course of the first 3 rounds, he's able to absorb Robert's strikes, and the strikes he's inflicting on Robert are slowly adding up. And by the 4th and 5th round, you saw Robert very hurt in those fights. And so he's only got 3 rounds against Paulo. And I think Paulo in those 3 rounds is just going to overwhelm Yoel Romero when it comes to output on the feet. And you know, should Yoel get it down to the ground, I think there's a chance that that Costa can get the finish down there too. If it goes to the ground, though, I'll say I think Yoel's winning this fight. I think his wrestling and grounded pound outweighs the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of Paulo Costa. If it goes down to the ground, I think Yoel wins. But I think this is a 3-round war. I think this has fight of the night written all over it. And it pains me to say it. I love Yoel Romero. but I've got to go a split decision victory for Paulo Costa. So that wraps it up for part 1 here, guys. If you liked what you saw, please hit the like button. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. I really appreciate the support. And be sure to check out part 2, where I'm going to be covering the co-main and main event: Nate Diaz, Anthony Pettis, Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next video.